Hey guys, we continue today in Mark chapter 11, where we see Jesus in a very confrontational mood, confronting the hypocrites who would rip off the poor outside the temple as they came to make their offerings. That made Jesus really mad. He hates that kind of stuff. And Jesus declares this temple to be a temple of prayer. He says, "My house shall be called a temple of prayer, a place of prayer for all nations." Now, we've been talking about the house of prayer thing and speaking about some of the fundamental simplicities of what prayer is all about. But I love the fact that he adds there, for all nations. Now, Peter is the one who's writing this account. It's actually his words. Mark is just the scribe, and the book is named after the one who physically wrote it. But these are Peter's thoughts. Now, if anybody was not a man for all nations, it was surely Peter. He was the one who had to have a vision from God to change his mind about all nations, but he did. And he suddenly became an advocate that the gospel was for everyone. And he, of all the accounts of this particular situation, is the only one who writes there, for all nations. This house shall be a place of prayer for all nations. I want to look on that for a moment. Sometimes think that our prayer life is rather narrow. Our prayer life is just about me and what I can see and from what I can hear around me. But the world is made up of many nations. And Peter is urging us to pray for the nations, to pray for those that are in need, for those who need to hear the gospel, to pray for those who are suffering sadly and badly because of poor leadership. To pray for the nations is a fundamental function of any good church. Any church that is so insular that it just prays for the things that are around it and that it can see are not doing, I believe, what prayer is meant to be doing. So we look at this prayer for all nations, and we know what we need to pray for. Primarily for redemption, primarily that the Christians would be able to stand up and be able to use their position as followers of Christ to advocate strongly for the cause of the gospel. We're not necessarily praying for their safety and all that kind of stuff, because God has that in his hands and his ultimate will surely be achieved. But what we are praying for is that salvation would come to the nations, that Jesus, the light of the world, would be proclaimed with boldness, no matter the consequence, for the cause of Christ. But I sometimes think it's also a call to think about that the nations are called to pray for all the nations. And I think the other nations are praying for us at the same time as we are praying for them. And so we need to take some time today to pray for the nation, our nation. Our nation particularly has been through some incredibly troubled times. But we're eternal optimists. We're hoping for the best and believing that God has a wonderful plan of redemption for the salvation of the souls of our country, but also to meet the physical needs and the challenges that are all around us, to stand against the issues of injustice and the causes that offend Christ. But then also this nation is meant to be praying for other nations. We look around us here and we see Zimbabwe. I come from there. What a horrific situation is happening up there. But you know what? Amidst all the pain and the suffering of the hunger and the crime and the poverty of that nation right now, there is a revival taking place. Somebody's praying for Zimbabwe, that even amidst all of the persecution and the problems that they face, the church has never been as strong. In rural areas, people are gathering. They're on their knees pleading because of drought and poor leadership. They're pleading for God. And in some strange way, all of these problems have led to become an incredibly powerful evangelistic tool. You see, when people are on their knees, they're already halfway to looking to God. And whoever puts their people on their knees has actually done redemption a good opportunity. People living in plenty don't look to Christ, but people who are living in poverty do. And so as we pray that God would use sometimes the strangest of tools to turn people to himself, God is able to use the tool of poverty, the tool of crime, the tool of injustice against those who ordinarily should not be suffering that. God is able to use those for his perfect will, purpose, and to fulfill his cause. Have a look historically. The nation of Israel, when they were on their knees, when they were in the wilderness with Moses, when they were really on their knees, they turned their eyes to God, believing Him to be the source of their strength and their provision. Maybe today, as we pray for our church, our country, and other nations as well, that God will do a great work amongst them. They will probably begin with us on our knees as we pray for them. Have a fantastic day, guys. See you tomorrow. Bye-bye.